إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Indeed, all praise and thanks are for Allah. We praise and thank Him. We seek His help and we ask His forgiveness. We take refuge in Allah from the evil of ourselves and from our sinful deeds. Whoever Allah guides, no one can mislead, and whoever He leaves to stray, no one can guide. And I bear witness that there is no one worthy of worship except Allah. He is one, having no partners. And I bear witness that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is His servant and His messenger. Peace and blessings of Allah be upon him and upon his family and his companions. I'm about to proceed. Now, it was only just a couple of weeks ago that we were celebrating Eid al-Adha, which is, of course, part of it is commemorating the extraordinary sacrifice that a great prophet, Ibrahim alayhi salam, and his son, alayhi salam, were willing to make. And I think we know the story of the sacrifice. And so I'm not going to go into details of that story, but actually, sacrifice is really very much part of our being. Yes? Not just in terms of, the qurbani, as we call it, yes, but really in terms of our sort of day-to-day activities, there are sacrifices that we need to make in order to practice our deen. And that's the topic, really, of today's bayan, inshallah. The idea of sacrifice in general, a very sort of wide meaning of sacrifice. And we can use an English definition, like the English dictionary definition of sacrifice is something along the lines of giving something up or suffering some sort of loss, okay, but for the sake of other considerations. Now that's a rough dictionary definition. And notice there are actually two parts to this, and really this is one of the points I want to make today, inshallah, that there are two parts. It is giving something up or leaving something or suffering some sort of loss, spending, yes, this sort of thing. That's part of it, but it's for the sake of something else, some other consideration. Yes? It's not just loss. It's not just loss or giving something up. It is for the sake of something else. Now, it may be, the sacrifice may be the thing that we have to give up or we suffer loss in. And it may be something very massive. Like Ibrahim alayhi salam being willing to give something up which would have been, we imagine, of immense value to him. And by the way, it wasn't just the sacrifice of his son that Ibrahim sacrificed. In that passage in Surah As-Saffat, what's mentioned, you see, it says, وَقَالَ إِنِّي ذَاهِبٌ إِلَىٰ رَبِّي سَيَهْدِينِ. That passage, that part starts with that he says, I am going to my Lord. He gives dawah to his people, he tries to convince them of the error of their ways, and they become violent, yes, they reject him. And then what does he do? He makes hijrah. He leaves his land, yes. وَقَالَ إِنِّي ذَاهِبٌ إِلَىٰ رَبِّي سَيَهْدِينِ. He says that I'm going to my Lord, surely He will guide me. Now, leaving one's land, making hijrah is a massive sacrifice. The place you were raised in, your people, your property. Now, that's just a little point that we're not required to make that physical hijrah, yes, unless conditions require it. As long as, for instance, for us in this country, because we can, alhamdulillah, we can practice our deen, yes, there's no requirement to make hijrah. But there is there's a sort of a spiritual hijrah. The scholars say that it's not just a physical thing. Yes, leaving an area of evil, whether it's a physical area or a symbolic area, metaphorical area. So, like if we're involved in some sort of community where there is evil going on, sinfulness, leaving that or leaving some sort of activity. Like really, I think a lot of us need to make hijrah from certain aspects of the internet. You know, to leave it, to be able to just let go of it. Yeah? This is also sacrifices, it's hijrah, and Ibrahim a.s. he did that. Anyway, but he was, the sacrifice that he thought he had to make, it's massive, you know, to sacrifice your own son. Now, we're generally not required to make sacrifices of that level, but there are certain sacrifices we do need to make in the course, as I say, in the course of our day. Things that we need to be willing to give up. So it's giving up something of value. It may be of value, maybe of great value, but it's for the sake of something else, and something of even greater value, we might say. Yeah, something of even greater value. Because for us, if we think about it, you know, if what we give up, let's say in this world, leads to Jannah, yes, then it's of much greater value, you see. And we're told this in the Quran. There's for instance, in Surah Al-A'la, we're told that قَدْ أَفْلَهَ مَنْ تَزَكَّى وَذَكَرَ رَسْمَ رَبِّهِ فَصَلَّى. You see that successful is the one who purifies himself and remembers the name of his Lord, and prays. But then what? بَلْ تُؤْثِرُونَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى. Nay, but you prefer the life of this world, whereas the hereafter, yes, that is better and more lasting, because it's eternal. And we forget this sometimes. Yes, we forget. Now, one example. I just want to give an example of sacrifice. Now, probably nowadays, very few people play chess, but maybe some of you know the rules of chess. Now, and the reason I mention chess is because those of you who don't know the rules, very, very simply, the purpose of a game of chess is to checkmate the opponent's king. It's like winning the king. You have all these different pieces, and the king is the most valuable piece, you might say. The most valuable, because if you lose your king, you've lost the game. So that's the purpose of the game. But the most powerful piece on the board, and there's all these different pieces, yes? The most powerful piece is the queen. All right? Now, what do people sometimes do? And it's very dramatic, and it's always, you know, it's quite exciting. Sometimes people will sacrifice the queen, which is the most powerful piece on the board. Why? In order to checkmate the opponent's king. So in the game of chess, people may give up the most powerful piece. Why? In order for something even more important, i.e. checkmating the opponent's king. Yes, that's, and people talk about queen sacrifice, very dramatic. Now, the question then, for us as Muslims, yes, is why aren't we willing to sacrifice those things that we need to give up? Yes. Why aren't we, if it's going to lead to something of greater value, something even greater reward, why aren't we willing to do this? And that's what I want to look at today, inshallah. You know, really, it's a bit strange if we think about it. That if we know that something is going to be more valuable to us or of greater reward than the thing we're giving up, yes, why aren't we willing to do it? And the Prophet ﷺ, he made this clear. He said in a hadith, words to the effect that never will you leave something for Allah Almighty except that He will replace it, yes, with something better than it for you. Yes, this hadith in Musnad Ahmad is regarded as sahih. So we know this. I mean, if we trust that hadith, we know that whatever we give up, there we will get something better, inshallah. Allah will replace it if we're doing it for the sake of Allah. Okay, you know, even and we're told, for instance, we're told in the Quran, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. Yes, وَمَا تُنْفِقُوا مِنْ شَيْءٍ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ بِهِ عَلِيمٌ. You know, one of the things about the sacrifice, as mentioned, it wasn't just Ibrahim alayhi salam who sacrificed. His son, who some say was around 13. He was at the age where he could share in his father's endeavors, in his father's work, in his father's walking. So some say, Allah knows best, we don't know his, but they were around 13. He was around 13, some people say, some of the scholars. But don't forget, when his father asked him, and his father did ask him, what is your view? He told him about the dream. And how did Ismail, and it's taken by most to be Ismail alayhi salam, how did he respond? Ya abati fal ma tu'mar, satajiduni insha'Allah min as-sabirin. He says, oh my father, do as you have been commanded. This is a boy, yes, encouraging his father to carry out what they thought was the sacrifice. And it wasn't. That wasn't the sacrifice, because his blood didn't have to be shed. It was the willingness. That was the test, they say. But this young man, or this boy, is encouraging his father to do what Allah has commanded. And he says, and inshallah, you will find me, to be one of the patient. Anyway, well, let's go back to the idea why we may not do this. When we're being told that whatever you spend, you won't attain righteousness until you spend out of that which you love. You won't attain bir. It's in the Quran, that you won't attain bir until you spend out of that which you love, you cherish, you see, because it's hard. Yes. But then what are we told? And whatever you spend, whatever you spend, indeed Allah has knowledge, full knowledge of it. So it's not going to go to waste, you see. And this is the part that we must keep reminding ourselves. Sacrifice doesn't just involve giving something up, or spending something, or losing something, or suffering some loss. It's not that. That's part of it. The other part is that there is something in return. We do it for the sake of something. We do it in order to please Allah. We do it for a reward as well. It's okay to, but not reward necessarily in this world. So we do something, but for the sake of something else, inshallah. And again, I have mentioned this before, I'll just mention very quickly again. Sometimes we have a sort of a false idea of what worship involves, what our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what that involves. That we have a false idea. And what do I mean by this? Well, we know, for instance, we're told in the Quran, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I did not create jinn or humanity except to worship me. That's the purpose of our existence, all right? To worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We know this, okay? But then what's the next verse? We're told, مَا أُرِيدُ مِنْهُمْ مِنْ رِزْقٍ وَمَا أُرِيدُ أَنْ يُطْعِمُونَ. That Allah is saying that I do not want, or I do not demand that they provide me with anything. I don't demand provision of them, nor do I demand that they feed me. And then it goes, in Allah, in the next verse, Inna Allahu huwa razzaqu dhul quwwatil mateen. Indeed, it is Allah. He is the provider of all sustenance. He's the provider, Lord of might and firm, the eternal. So you see, we've got to be very clear about this. We are here to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we know that He doesn't gain anything from it. He doesn't want us to feed Him or to provide for Him. We know that none of us think of actually literally feeding Allah or providing for Him. But actually in our worship, sometimes we behave as if we feel as if we're doing Him a favor. We're doing something for His sake. It is for His sake in the terms of seeking His pleasure and so on. We're not doing it for anyone else. Yes? But He doesn't gain anything from it. We've got to be able to switch this mindset, you see. Yes, that Allah, He has no needs, you see. He has no needs. So He doesn't gain anything from our worship. Who gains from our worship? Who gains from our salah and our zakah and our qurbani and so on, our sacrifices? Who gains? We do. This changes the way we might approach things. Because, if we feel that we're benefiting someone else, like, say, an employee with an employer, yes, we, as an employee, if we're an employee, we're getting salary from our employer. But actually, he is also gaining. His company's growing or whatever. And so we might feel that, we're having to do all this hard work. What for? It's not just for me. Yeah? But the relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is completely different. Because He has no needs. So He doesn't gain anything at all. It's all for us. Now when we realize that, then maybe we get more inclined to be willing to make these sacrifices, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and make the sacrifices, because those sacrifices are needed. You know, even in the daily worship, we need some time for salah, don't we? We have to give up some of our precious time, as we see it. Move away from those entertainments or those pleasures and so on. Yes, and for the men, if they're going to the masjid, a bit more time is required. Zakah, it does involve giving away some of our hard-earned money, as people say. You know, I earned this money, I worked hard. Well, who gave you the ability to work hard? Who is the provider? And it's a tiny fraction, 1/40th of not just our income, our savings. And yet people, even there, they resent that. Or they feel some sort of grudge. And again, who benefits? We do, inshallah. So there are certain sacrifices that need to be made. But, you know, if we remember that it's all for our sake, then maybe we'll be more willing to make it. And finally, all right, going back to that chess game, you know, you might say, well, if someone knows that by sacrificing their queen, they're going to win the game, they're going to checkmate, why don't they do it? Well, there's a number of reasons, you see. One reason people don't do it is because they don't know the rules. Or they don't remember that that's the purpose of the game. Yes, and when we can apply this to ourselves, you know, if we know that, for instance, there are certain dunya sacrifices in this world, which will get us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which may lead to Jannah by Allah's rahmah. You see, why don't we do it? We might say, well, if we don't know the rules, if we don't know what it's about, that's one reason. But we probably have that basic knowledge. But another, now this is a subtle one, that, you know, in order to be able to checkmate, you've got to be able to see ahead. You know, if you know anything about chess, you've got to be able to see a number of moves ahead. So you give up your queen, but then 2 moves later, you checkmate the king. You've got to have that vision. You've got to be able to see. Now, same for us actually. We've got to be able to see akhirah in some ways. Now, we can't see akhirah through our eyes or our senses. We have to imagine. Now, how are we going to imagine? How are we going to imagine Jannah, for instance? We can't see it, we can't smell it, hear it. It's not. How are we going to make it more of a reality, inshallah, for us? Well, there are descriptions of Jannah and the hellfire in the Quran. There are descriptions in the Sunnah as well, in the Ahadith. These things, if we connect with it, it may well help us, you see. It may help us to make akhirah more of a reality, so that we're not so attached to dunya, you see. So we can let go of the things we need to let go, because the akhirah becomes more of a reality. Yes. And we're told this in the Quran. You see, right at the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, when there's a description of those who have taqwa. You see, we're told, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alif Lam Mim, Dhalika al-Kitabu la rayba fihi hudan lil-muttaqin. This book, no doubt in it, is a guidance for those who have taqwa. Yeah, those who are God conscious. But then what are we told? Alladhina yu'minuna bil ghaib. Those who believe in the unseen, that which is beyond our perception. So be able to, yes, believe in the akhirah, even though we can't see it. So, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ and they الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ and establish the prayer, perform the prayer properly, and spend from what we have provided them. But then it goes on, وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِمَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكَ وَمَا أُنزِلَ مِنْ قَبْلِكَ وَبِالْآخِرَةِ هُمْ يُوقِنُونَ. You see, that those who believe in what was revealed to you, to the Prophet ﷺ, and what was revealed from before you, yes, this is requirements. But, and in the akhirah, in the hereafter, they have yaqeen, they have firm conviction, certainty, you see. That's what's needed. That's another one of the qualities of the muttaqeen. Anyway, we better start. I have no idea what the time is because I can't see the clock, but I think I should stop there, inshallah. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه وإنه غفور رحيم.